Okay, so hey everyone, and welcome to Who Are You and Why Should We Care? How to Write an Effective Artist Bio. My name is Andrew. I'm the editor of Canadian Musician Magazine, and this is the first in the series of many webinars we're going to be presenting coming up down the road. So we appreciate you joining us, and I've been looking forward to getting started here. So I want to share this quote. This comes from a friend, Luther Mallory. He's a band and performance coach, also a contributor to Canadian Musician. And a few years ago, he wrote a column on the artist bio. And one of my favorite quotes that I've used pretty frequently since then is, "There's no such thing as a great band bio, just ones that aren't terrible." There's a bit of humor in there, but we're only half kidding, really. Pretty much every artist, virtually every artist, has a bio of some sorts. It's kind of a necessary evil, so to speak, in the industry, but yeah, people go through tons of them. It's very hard to stand out, but ultimately what we're doing here is giving you some tips to make sure that yours does. So, not to focus too much, that is my photo. As I mentioned before, I edit Canadian Musician Magazine. I've written press bios in the past for international touring clients like City and Colour, Xavier Rudd, July Talk. Through Canadian Musician, of course, had the opportunity to write feature stories and conduct lengthy interviews with the likes of Rush, Avril Lavigne, and also done a lot of panels, presentations at various industry events. So just to establish some credibility that what we're going to be presenting today is kind of culled from years of experience reading biographies, working with publicists, but also learning from other people in the industry. And yeah. So one thing to keep in mind throughout here, I'm going to be sharing a lot of tips. They're, I guess, kind of presented as rules, but keep in mind there are exceptions to every rule. Not everything here needs to be followed, but understand that if you are going to stray from it, do something unconventional, that you understand the risks. What I mean by this is that there was a bio I read once that was from a rock band, and essentially it was the story of how these four otherworldly characters met in outer space, and a big epic galactic war, and ultimately it culminated in the end with one single paragraph saying the four came together on Earth to start a rock band, and that was the end of it. It was unconventional but very engaging, gave a really good insight into the group, their sense of humor, and ultimately their brand. And that's another key thing to remember here, is that with anything you're putting out there, your bio especially, which is a first impression in a lot of cases to people in the industry, make sure that it represents your brand, that it properly works with the image you are conveying in all of your professional endeavors. So the basics, here are some of the things that we're looking to accomplish with an artist bio. You're telling people what you want them to know. What I mean by that is, they say when you go on a first date, the person isn't really meeting you, they're meeting your best representative, essentially where you're highlighting all of your qualities and sweeping everything else under the rug for the time being. That's what the bio is. This is your step forward. You only need to put in there what you want people to know, what's going to set you apart, or I guess to relate to the title, telling people why they should care. First impressions are important, and like I said, this and maybe your music in tandem together are going to be a lot of people's first impression of your band. So more importantly there, your first paragraph in that bio is going to be the difference as to whether someone keeps reading to find out more or tosses it to the side. It's an unfortunate reality. We'd like to think that the music will stand on its own, but it's such a saturated marketplace that everything that you put out there, you want to be top shelf, something that might just engage someone to latch on and become a fan, want to work with you, etc. So the bio is important. Hooking someone right off the bat with that bio, even more so. Know your audience for this. So the biography, most artists will post it on their website under the bio or about section to give an introduction to who they are. So fans, anyone using the internet that comes to your online properties, I mean, Facebook, you can post your bio there in the about section. That's who's going to be encountering it. Of course, it's also going to be kind of the first point of contact for media, whether you have a publicist that's sending out PR with all of or part of your bio contained in it, or of course, if someone's writing a story about you or doing a feature, they've conducted an interview, they want to have some talking points, they're going to be checking out your bio as well. And finally, the industry. If there's a booking agent, a manager that's considering taking you on, even if it's not their introduction to you, they're going to be consulting and using your biography. Same goes for when you're doing grant applications, when you've been accepted to play festivals. Often they're going to want a small paragraph that is going to be called from your press bio. So it's an important body of work. With that, you've got to know where it's going. So there were some examples there, website, social media. Remember that if your publicist, if you've got a tour, a new album or something, your publicist is going to send out that news. The first paragraph is going to say Band X has a great new album. It's put out with ex-producer and a little bit of info, and then right under that is going to be more information about the band, almost always called from your bio. As I mentioned, festival guides, if you're taking part in a conference like ECMAs, WCMAs, they're going to want a 150-word blurb that most times is an excerpt from the larger press bio. With the blogosphere being so popular, like articles in the newspaper and magazines and whatnot would normally be written from scratch, but in a lot of blogs, if someone's giving you press attention, sometimes they're just going to copy and paste parts of your bio. And so again, you want to make sure that what's going out there properly represents you, does you justice. Of course, if you're looking for funding, particularly important to Canadian artists, the bio is going to come in handy there as well. Finally, like everything in the music industry, this is a popularity contest. So what you're putting forward here, you're trying to win people over, you're trying to engage them and make them pay attention. So as far as the actual makeup, the archetype of an artist bio, if we can put it that way, and again, you don't have to hit all these. If you're a new band and say your history, so we want to start, make sure you're telling people who you are, the members of your band, how you came together, your history in the music industry. That said, if that information isn't that interesting, if it's for girls that met in a high school hallway and started, jamming things out together, focus on what's interesting about that. What are your shared interests, your shared influences? What first brought you together? More than just the story of how it happened, maybe why it happened, or funny rituals that you have in band practice might give a better idea of to who you are as to something more, plain. Of course, pretty much no matter what, you want to make sure that you're telling people what you sound like, what your music sounds like on record. If you've played a lot of live shows and you've got a great show that people talk about, you can discuss your approach there, but give them an idea of what to expect if they hit play, if they come to check you out. What are they in for? Want to, of course, highlight what you've done, achievements, awards. If other media have said good things about you, we want to make sure to highlight that. Projects, past albums, anything that will help your credibility, put it in there. Probably most important, and I should have put it last, how you're different, how you stand out, what sets you apart from the heap of other artists you're competing with, and more importantly, other bios you're competing with here. So again, that's where you'd want to inject anything unique about what you do. There was a band I wrote a bio for that was known for their merch items, and they made toothbrushes and hand knit sweaters and all kinds of goofy things that sell at shows. That gave really good insight into who they were as a band, and it was important to include both for them and it makes the writer's job easier as well. And finally, most bios are written around an album cycle, or in some cases a tour. So when you're just starting out, you'll want kind of an all-encompassing bio, but make sure that in there somewhere you're focusing on your current product. And most artists that have more than one record will get a new bio done with each one. And with each subsequent album, you're kind of condensing the background story and adding more to focus on the here and now. So an artist like City and Color that we mentioned from the beginning, right in the outset, it's going to be a lot about Dallas Green, about how City and Color was formed. Now that he's 4 or 5 records deep, each one can kind of encapsulate that background info into maybe a single paragraph, and then focus more so on the current album. How does it stand out from his back catalog? What are some of the things that have changed since his last album, for example? So those are essentially what you want to make sure you're including, unless, if it's not something that's going to hook someone, leave it out. If it's not adding to your credibility, leave it out. So some things to make sure that you're doing in your biography. First off, make sure that it's well written. And I know that that's kind of subjective, but maybe not as much as you'd think. So don't write it in first person. Again, there are exceptions to every rule, but you want to make it seem, even if you've had to write it yourself, you want to make it seem that it's been done professionally. It's in a third person, journalistic somewhat, which again adds to credibility. Hire a writer if you can. I know that the whole seminar is based on how to write an effective artist bio. If you're not in the position that you can afford to pay a writer, you're going to be doing it yourself. But if you can hire a writer, do so. It's going to end up with a better product, almost certainly. But still, you want to know what an effective bio looks like so that when you're working with someone, you can help get it there. Or if they hand something back to you that doesn't hit all of these on the head, you can go back and again make sure that that you're getting what you want and what you need. Bio should be factual, not fluffy. What I mean is you don't want to go overboard talking about how great you are. I mean, this is marketing. You are highlighting your strengths, but it can't be too blatant. It can't be too in your face, the hyperbole, or else you're turning someone off right away. And finally, give it style. I mean, literary devices, metaphor, alliteration is a great one. We're going to go through some examples of really good bio openings later on where we can highlight some of these. But I said it should be journalistic, but not so much so that it's dry and feels like reporting. You want to add some unique character to the writing style to properly, well, as the next point says, tell your story. Whatever about your band is worth noting, that's what we want to highlight. Again, you're trying to intrigue people, answering the question, why should we care? What about your band is unique? What about your band can we latch on to and maybe identify with? Or what's funny? What's controversial even? All of these things that just escape the mundane, that's what we're after. And we're going to try to pack as much of that into these few paragraphs as we can. Finally, make sure that you're sharing your achievements. And again, even if you're just starting out, there are a few things that we can add in here. So any awards, accolades you've received, if you got a good review in Penguin Eggs or Canadian Musician or Exclaim have talked about you in any sense, why not put that in there? Festivals and shows you've played, attaching yourself to a well-known event or artist that you've shared a stage with or played with is going to, again, add to your credibility and help kind of pull you up to a higher tier. Talk about the places that you've been. And again, this is one where even if you're just starting out, if you played an open mic in Paris when you were on vacation, add that in. Very well received audiences in Paris absolutely loved the show or something. You're not lying to anyone. And again, just adding to your worldliness, it's making you seem attractive as an artist. And finally, name drop, don't overdo it. But what I mean by that is if you've worked with a producer that has some big credits, list them. If you've played shows, even if you were on at 11 a.m. and Big Sugar was headlining, you've opened for Big Sugar technically. So add that in. And again, it's going to help elevate your profile in the eyes of your reader. We're going to want to highlight your strengths, as we mentioned. So if it's the recorded music, which it definitely should be, that's a good place to start. But if you've got a crazy live show that's a lot of people talk about what makes it great. Your creativity, I mentioned the merch items before, that's a great one. A band, Colorado from Canada, did a tour called the Meet the Mayor Tour, where every city they stopped in, they arranged to drop into City Hall and do a photo op with that city's mayor. It was a great buzz builder, got a lot of press in each local market ahead of their show. But I mean, put it in the bio and it gives a great idea as to, again, your individual personalities or the overall character of your band, and endears people. Humor, inject your sense of humor in there. Again, if you've got some funny stories from a tour, you've gone through drummers like Spinal Tap, make light of that, of course, if it fits your brand. If you're a don't give a care punk band, that might be more conducive to humor in a bio than, say, a very serious Americana or folk roots musician. But again, it's up to you to decide how you're going to be portrayed and what you're comfortable with. And what I mean by drive, of course, is your work ethic. I mean, have you had to fight off adversity to get your music to where it is? If so, people love the underdog story. And finally, keep it as short as it can be. What I mean is, we've talked about a whole bunch of things that you're going to want to include, you're going to want to highlight. If you don't have much to talk about. If you've kind of packed everything into a few paragraphs, don't feel the need to keep going just to fill space. Get what you need or want to get out there and cut the rest out. Finally, things to do is make sure you're happy with the product. And there's Pharrell, he's happy. So let's jump over here, take a few questions, which we'll again do at the end. We'll have a longer question period, but just anything we've touched on so far that you want to ask about. Okay, so we've got one here about how long should the bio be. Well, as I mentioned before, that's kind of subjective. The ones that I've written in the past for major recording artists, I always aim for the ballpark of 500 to 600 words. Sometimes when that's sent back to the artist, they'll add a few things once they've seen it that maybe didn't come up in our initial interview. So sometimes it will go a bit beyond that. Rarely is it shorter, but I guess that's a good ballpark to work within. But that said, I mean, City and Color, we've talked about it already. His current bio for the latest album, If I Should Go Before You, is quite lengthy, but yet it's very beautifully written. He's got a very dedicated niche fan base that this really fits. It really fits his identity. I think a lot of people in that crowd would be interested. So you can break the mold, again, as long as you're not alienating people. If it's too long and it feels too long, you'll know, someone reading it will know, and you're doing yourself more harm than good in that case. So I've got another question about what it would cost to hire a writer, and that's a great one. And again, there's a pretty big range here. I'd say for a professional bio, if you're approaching a writer that you don't know personally, you're looking at somewhere between $100 on the low end up to 300-400 if it's someone that has a really great journalistic pedigree or done a number of press bios in the past. That said, consider strategic, mutually beneficial partnerships, much like when you're getting photos taken or even recording. If there's someone in your network that, maybe is a budding writer that has some promise but doesn't have a lot of experience, maybe they'll take on your bio for free or a few bucks or in exchange for a guest list spot at your next show. And in turn, if your band in the next year, the profile grows, then now that individual has something to add to his or her resume. So keep an eye for ways that you can make things work on a budget. But ultimately, if you're looking to hire someone that's well established, I'd say between $100 and a few $100 is what to expect. But really, it's all about what you negotiate and plan to get. So. Okay, and there are a few other questions, but I think we'll touch on them shortly. And again, if it's not answered when we come to the end, we'll have a longer period and we can go through more. So moving on, things not to do with your bio. It's kind of an unfortunate situation, but one where I think it's easier to learn from horror stories and things gone wrong than it is just a bunch of tips as to what you should be doing. So here are some things to avoid in your bio. Don't overhype, and this goes back to being too fluffy. But some examples from actual biographies, this band has a groundbreaking new sound, or they're going to revolutionize the music industry. Chances are that you're not. And even if you end up, or you are poised to do so, writing about it in your bio can come off as well, cocky, boastful, and again, can sour the reader's impression. Again, the next Michael Jackson, it's just it's a tall reach, and you're giving people a reason to doubt you, a reason to doubt your credibility. A couple of cliches from music journalism in general that I'd advise keeping out of your bio are musical recipes or musical love children. So example of those we sound like Wu-Tang Clan hooked up with Shania Twain and had a baby. Hopefully you don't, because that would be terrible. And same with the recipes, where you're take a spoonful of Fleetwood Mac, add in some dash of Wiz Khalifa and stir, put in the oven and sprinkle with Foo Fighters at the end. It's pretty cliche, it's pretty yucky, and isn't doing you justice. Some other cliches, I think every hard rock or metal band in the world has unleashed a new album at one point. It doesn't have their It doesn't have the impact that it once did because it's just been overused and hammered into the ground. Same with, I mean, with the Twitter generation. How many times has a friend been at the show, been at a concert, and said, Band X is absolutely killing it on stage? If you're in the industry, it's something that you hear and see a lot, and it again just kind of dulls the impact that it would otherwise have. Another thing not to do, I guess I am inventing this term, but dead weighting. And what I mean by that is putting things into your bio that are going to limit how someone's impression of you as to what tier you're at in your career. So what I mean by that is some artists, for example, it's 2015, are releasing a new album. We'll say, a promising star that won the Breakout Artist Award from 92.5 FM back in 2007. Well, you're raising a red flag that if this is still an achievement you're highlighting that was 8 years ago and there's nothing since then, again, you're setting off doubt in your reader's mind as to, well, why should we be paying attention? Is there a reason that they've hit this glass ceiling? Another one is name dropping, but name dropping bands with a similar profile. So, for example, there was a bio from now they're a well-known Canadian rock act that have had several songs chart at radio, who in their bio had highlighted that they toured alongside another band that is kind of in the same boat, that had one or two breakout singles. And so when you're name dropping in a bio, people understand that you're trying to associate yourself with a higher tier of artists, that you're trying to, I don't want to say inflate, but, add some grandiose into the level that you're at of success so that people will pay more attention, especially on the industry side. But if you're limiting yourself with a band that may not be as well known as you are even, well, then it kind of bumps you down a tier in a sense. So something to watch out for. So here we go, leading by example. I've got some snippets from bios. These are actually all the opening. I mentioned how important it is to kick off with a bang. So I've got some examples of bios, some from artists that you might recognize, some from emerging artists that you probably won't. But we'll talk about why I think these are effective. And again, it is a subjective thing, but we'll go through. I'll read them aloud as well, just so that you can hear it and get a sense of some of the literary devices and whatnot. So Hawksley Workman, a very prolific Canadian artist. I think he's up to 14 or 15 full-length studio albums. He's also a member of the band Mounties that had some hits, Headphones, for example, a couple of years ago. So this is the opening of one of Hawksley's press bios. Singer and songwriter, broadcaster, performer, producer, poet, and playwright. Multi-instrumentalist and Mountie, Hawksley Workman is all of these and others still, an ambitious, ever-busy global ambassador of Canadian culture and creativity. The pun on the surname, it's too easy. So breaking that down, singer and songwriter, we've got the S alliteration there. Broadcaster stands on its own. Then there's the 4 P words right after. There's a real poetic, when you're reading this out loud or even in your head, there's a poetic rhythm to it. Multi-instrumentalist and Mountie again. You might argue that it's overdone, although I quite like how it rhymes off. Hawksley is all these things. So we've established him as prolific, hardworking, jack of all trades. Just in a few words here, that's the impression you're giving the reader. Ambassador of Canadian culture, where we've tied him to, again, elevated his profile. And then the pun on the surname, it's too easy. Of course, by saying that, by downplaying it but still mentioning it, we get the pun. It still gets delivered, and yet it's not blatant. It seems like, oh, we're above that, but you still get the recognition that comes with it. So moving on, July Talk. This is a band. They're still only one record deep and just exploded, at least in Canada and the U.S. It's the counterbalance of some really grisly kind of Tom Waits vocals with the pristine feminine voice, and they interact on stage. It's absolutely crazy. There's violence and emotion, and it's an absolutely terrific show. So this bio is the press bio from their first record. So at this point, they are unknowns. So let's get into this. Upon returning to his hometown of Toronto from a final European tour with his band, Peter Dreymanis sat sweaty and half drunk in a candlelit basement bar, nursing a drink, debating his next musical pursuit. I love this because we're setting the stage here. Hopefully you can picture the setting exactly. We've established Pete by saying, European tour. So he was in a band that has at least some traction. so we can call him a veteran of the music industry. Here he is debating his next musical pursuit. Lulled in lethargy, he paid little attention to the beat-up acoustic guitar being passed from patron to patron around him. That was until it found its home in the hands of Leah Fay. And there's the intrigue. We've introduced the partnership. We've created a very visual setting that, well, hopefully is good enough storytelling that it immerses someone to want to find out how this story progresses. Mise en Scène is a rock duo, these two ladies from Winnipeg. And again, this was from their the bio for their debut LP. So substance, sincerity, swagger, reverb. In 4 words, we've established the sound here. And what's great about that is that if we already kind of know what they sound like. When I read those 4 words, I'm thinking Japan Droid's White Stripes. I'm thinking, you know, MC5 even. All are abundant throughout the 9 tracks comprising Desire's Despair, the debut full-length from indie rock pop pair Mise en Scène. So we've hopefully hooked just with that sound where if you're into anything related to garage rock, keep going. And, you know, if you're looking for a country artist, chances are it's not here. Noble Thieves, another band from Winnipeg, just starting out, and I really like this one. God forbid anyone ever tries to remake Animal House. At least we know the infamous house party scene can be salvaged by swapping the shouting Otis Day and the Knights with Winnipeg's Noble Thieves. Noble Thieves, and yes, it's supposed to be spelled that way. So, in this short amount of time, we all know the house party from Animal House. Shout, make your hand, throw your hands up and shout. So by saying we can swap them out, we've basically established the Noble Thieves as a soulful, dancey, energetic rock act, which they definitely are. And of course, saying, yes, it's supposed to be spelled that way, we've highlighted something that's unique about the band. Trivial as it may seem, it's something that makes them more Googleable and stand out. So again, within that paragraph, we've established a lot about the band, what they sound like, and a little bit about what sets them apart. Not picking on Tiesto here, even if we were, I doubt he'd care. One of the highest paid performers on the planet right now. But this is Tiesto's from his latest press bio. We'll go through it, and I'll tell you why I don't think it's effective. Although again, it's a subjective thing. But for Tiesto, making music is about giving. The Grammy Award-nominated electronic dance music icon offered up his greatest gift yet in the form of his 5th full-length album and career first for a major label, A Town Called Paradise. That's saying a lot considering his track record too. There's nothing in here that hooks me, whether it's linguistic or even the content. And in fact, by saying his music is about giving, and that's why he gifted this new album, it almost comes off as a bit pompous. And I just don't think it does him any favors as far as establishing why he's one of the most popular artists on the planet. And I mean, if it wasn't Tiesto, if it was anyone else that had started this way, I think you'd be turning people off pretty quickly. So another one, and I'll engage here, feel free to take a stab at this in the question field, but this is the opening for a bio by a Canadian artist. So it's someone that folks across Canada should know, but hopefully this gives you some clues as to who we're talking about. The voice is unmistakable, immediately identifiable by those who know it, and intensely intriguing to those that don't. Who would this describe? Leonard Cohen. There you go. So we're in good shape here. It's actually not Leonard Cohen, but I mean, when you think of an unmistakable Canadian voice, Leonard Cohen, Neil Young, Sarah McLachlan, keep them coming here. Jan Arden is a great guess as well. Tom Petty, not Canadian, but a unique voice. What's great though is that you're already thinking about these absolute icons. Everyone we've named so far is a huge international star. This is actually City in Color. It's from an earlier press bio. But what we've done here, and anyone that knows Dallas's voice, someone says, yeah, that makes sense. What we know, if you know Dallas's voice at all, of City in Color, it's so unique, identifiable. But by putting this here, we're essentially putting him in the league indirectly with the likes of Leonard Cohen, Neil Young, and I think elevating that profile by making it sound kind of as though it's ubiquitous. So another great example. So here are a couple. We said earlier that you can feel free to stray outside the rules. Now the next two examples are granted from absolutely massive international artists. But if you go to the About Us or the About section on Foo Fighters' Facebook page, all you see is so there are guitars and stuff. And within that 7 words, we get probably a rock band if you're using 7 words to mention guitars. Great sense of humor here, and they're also kind of saying that their guitars and stuff. It sounds kind of nonchalant. We don't care, like us or don't. They're huge. Everyone knows the Foo Fighters already. It shows their sense of humor to band as a band, and I think ultimately, like we're trying to highlight, um, very much fits in with their brand identity. And here's another one. I'd said not to write in first person. Michael Bublé's newest bio, or yeah, well, it is a bio. It's on his site for his latest record. I think it's the best album I've ever made. I know every artist on earth says that when their new album is coming out, but really, this time it's true. I swear. You can ask my mother, but don't take my word for it or my mom's. Play it yourself, and you'll want to see and hear I'm telling, and you'll see and hear I'm telling the honest truth. So here's what Michael's established already. First off, I mean, he's established something of an intimacy with his fans, because Michael Bublé is someone you would almost guarantee would be hiring a big name writer to take on his bio. But he's decided to put this first person, family man. He's brought his mom into it, which I'm sure his fans find kind of adorable. He's also introduce his sense of humor by bringing his mother in and saying, this time it's true, I swear. But then later on, we even get a sense of what the album is about. So we get a lot of insight into Michael Bublé as a performer and as a person, but also what to expect with the album. A wonderful journey about love, different kinds of love. Swings big time, it rocks, it's soulful, it's happy, sometimes a little sad, romantic, yummy, and heartfelt. If you know anything about Bublé, even if you haven't heard this record, it fits in with his brand, and hopefully, well, it definitely does to me, intrigues me. He's got some absolute hits. If this is his best work yet, why do I not want to check it out? So that takes us to the end, and I want to open it up again for questions here, and make sure that everyone gets what they want out of this. Let's lean over. Actually, yeah, there's some great ones here. I want to ask a quick question, though. I'm going to send out a poll here, just to gauge from our attendees, in which capacity do you work in the music industry? You'll see that your options are a performing artist or recording artist, singer-songwriter, or songwriter if you're working behind the scenes, industry professional, that would be managers, agents, label personnel, anything along those lines, or you're a writer or member of the media or other. And take a moment to fill that out. Oh, wow, great response. Yeah, so it looks like the vast majority we have here are performing artists or recording artists, about 70%. Great to see some industry folks out as well. And we do have some songwriters only as well. Okay, well, great bunch. I appreciate it. It's good to know to gauge the content a bit. So yeah, as far as questions here. Oh, here's a good one. So someone's asking, I'm a pioneer of their genre, someone that was very well known a while ago that's now coming back to making music and having to write a bio. Is there any harm into reaching back to talk about the career? Like, is that gap going to set off any red flags? It could, but you could also play this to your advantage. I mean, there's got to be some ways, whether it's an engaging story as to what brought you back to writing and performing music. If you want to share something personal about your life that would give people insight into you and ultimately why you're making music again, that would work well. I mean, if it was to, for example, I wrote a bio for an artist that was doing just that, had taken a while between records and kind of left the industry, and had come back because someone had created a fan site that gained a bunch of traction, and eventually there were hundreds of people trying to, and he kind of stumbled upon it, and it shows, yeah, that you've changed lives, that people you do, so maybe others yet still might want to. So there's lots of different ways you can play with it, but again, ultimately, you just want to make sure that it does right by you, that you're comfortable sharing what's in there, and that you're doing yourself justice. But you can inflate it. I mean, maybe it's that no one's made good music in the last while. You're sick of hearing the same old radio crap, so you started to write and record again. Why not? It shows a bit of swag, a bit of attitude, and would probably again intrigue people. I've asked here, should I highlight other industry experience in a bio if you're now getting started in an artistic endeavor? That's a great question too. And again, if it's going to help, establish credibility. So I had a bio for a punk kind of tinge or hard rock band or garage rock band, and the singer had worked in the industry. He'd worked on music videos by some of the top artists in the world. And the band, this kind of spiteful rock act, was born of a distaste for the industry, the manufactured pop of today's music industry. So in that case, highlighting his career experience establishes a ton of credibility and a bunch of interest in the band. It's like he was so sick of what he was seeing and the same thing over and over that it makes the band sound like the antithesis of that, and would rope people in from the audience that they're trying to capture. Let's see here. Okay, some great questions and ones that I'll reply to privately. Anyway, I guess that brings us to the end here. I really want to thank everyone for coming out. We're going to be sharing the presentation shortly so that you can consult a recording. Of course, there are handouts at the side if you're joining us live. There's the complete PowerPoint presentation here in the notepad format so that you can jot things down next to each slide. There's also two bio examples. Again, it's one that I've come across that I think are well done. One is for Cancer Bats, who are a very well-known punk hardcore act from Canada, and I chose them just because they're 5 albums deep. If you listen to hard music in Canada, you know who they are. So that gives you a good example of an effective bio for an established band, one that's been around for a while, where you're kind of wanting to focus more on the here and now, with the backstory being not an afterthought, but a bit more condensed. And then Mise en Scène, the duo from Winnipeg that we dissected that opening paragraph of earlier, there's their complete bio. And they're an emerging artist. This is the first go. So that'll give you an idea as to how to effectively establish a bio for someone new to the scene. If you are joining us on the recording, Cancer Bats or Mise en Scène, if you check out their sites, you can check out their current bios. Anyhow, CanadianMusician.com is our home base for the magazine and all of our other endeavors. Again, my name is Andrew. We really appreciate you joining us, and we'll be back with more of these down the road. So hope that you'll join us.